I grew up in the Kentucky hills. Over the course of my lifetime, I saw the effects of water and gravity as they eroded my town exclusively downward. But why is it geologists are telling me, over time the earth layers stack upward? A continuous process of new layers forming on top of the previous existing layers. A story in complete opposition to what my eyes are telling me. How could this be happening? Where is this happening? And why do the explanations not match what the layers actually look like? Whatever answer you think you have now, I challenge you to retain it. Throughout the video, I utilize Google Images to display common examples. With this method, I couldn't fake or cherry-pick my findings, as all other videos do. This method of collecting evidence forced me to throw all my original theories into the garbage, then follow where the evidence pointed me, and adopt a theory so contrary to anything I had ever heard. If you don't agree with my unexpected conclusion, that's great, because the real goal is thought and conversation, not that you accept a solution I didn't even expect to find. This video is long, because it has to be. The audience is for adults. I use cartoons because I like to draw.
A simple question. How can layers build uphill when gravity is exclusively pulling downhill?
Another successful haul. Our kingdom really knows how to move some dirt. Show off. It's easy to find videos like this one. Gravity tosses dirt downhill all the time, effortlessly. I wonder what process is going to put that dirt back on top of that hill. The dirt had to get up there somehow. Every day us ants fight nature's force, gravity. What if instead we harnessed the force of nature that built that hill and used it to our benefit? We'd be the most awesome kingdom in the land. But how does nature put dirt on top of the hill? Those guys look cool. Wonder if they'll know. Hey guys.
Hey there, brother.
Yo, nerd. What up?
We're going to win the Queen's affection with this dead grasshopper.
Oh, no doubt, she'll be impressed. But I may have an even better idea. I just need some help sorting it out.
What you got?
There are two opposing forces in nature. One that builds the hills, and one that tears hills down. Can you help me identify them?
We learned in school there are three main types. There's water erosion, wind erosion, and ice erosion.
Let's search for examples of this. A water erosion example we can all relate to. Here's another type of water erosion. And an example of wind erosion. If you look at all of these, you will find a common theme. It's going from a higher place to a lower place. It's eroding a higher location to a lower location. This higher place is being consumed by the sea. When we look, we keep finding examples of higher to lower.
Well, it's gotta stop somewhere. It can't just keep traveling downhill.
If we look at pictures of rivers, we see brown dirt dumping into the sea. Those dirt deposits came from somewhere. If erosion always travels to a lower location, I think we found the destination. Where else could this brown be coming from, other than someplace higher?
You proved your point. Let's see some examples of ice erosion.
Sure. Looking, I can validate there's rocks in this stuff. And it looks like it's transporting the rocks from a higher elevation to a lower elevation.
Let me guess. You're going to mention the rocks are going to the sea.
Exactly.
These images make me sick. I couldn't move that much dirt in a million lifetimes.
I think they're cool.
You think that just because you don't work. It's aggravating to look at.
A moment ago, I would have completely agreed with you, but the more I think about it, the more excited I get. My plan's gonna impress the Queen way beyond a dead grasshopper.
Whatever.
He's just jealous. What's your idea?
Brace yourselves! We have seen the force that tears down the dirt, tossing it into its watery grave at the bottom of the sea. But there is another force way more awesome, one that kicks erosion in its saggy gut. This force constructs, drawing dirt out of the deep and placing it on top of the very hills. My plan is to harness this natural force of awesome and build our kingdom to the sky. My pioneering friends, all I need out of you is to tell me what the name of this natural force is that brings the rocks and dirt from a lower level and places it on a higher level.
What are you talking about? Dirt doesn't go uphill. There's a thing called gravity.
Well, that doesn't make sense. That hill had to be created somehow.
Well, yeah, but it took millions of years. You really should have learned that in school.
Millions of years is a length of time. I was hoping to identify the process.
I get the curiosity to your question. I can list many processes acting on the current natural structures, tearing them down. Unfortunately, I can't recall seeing any forces that build them up.
Well, that's a bummer.
But hold on, I can make this even more perplexing. The building process has to be more common than the erosion process. Otherwise, the erosion process would win, and everything would become flat.
That is perplexing, because if the building process is more common, why can't I recall witnessing it?
But hold on, let's kick this up a notch further. Looking at this photo, one would think the hill is there in the background, but technically speaking, everywhere above sea level is a hill. For example, if you were to go in your backyard and dig down, you will run into the same sedimentary layering in your hill. Meaning, it's not just the hills that are growing over time, it's nearly every place above water on the planet. If you live in the orange area on the map, you are living on sedimentary rocks that have layered up in height over time. Nearly anywhere, when you dig into the earth, you can see the layers.
That black layer there is coal. Coal is made of plants, and the plants were once alive on the top layer. Somehow, tons of new layers of rock got on top of the dead plants.
Check out how tall these layers are stacked.
This is perplexing. The volume of soil distributed across the earth is mind-boggling. Can you think of any continuous process to justify what we're seeing?
I see what you're saying, but I have personally never witnessed something to account for it.
Come on, don't give up. Let's try to figure it out.
Maybe the hill has always been there.
Maybe. No, couldn't be. In those hills we find fossils of dead animals. This would mean at one point the animals were here and the hill was not. This would force me to conclude the hill had to come at some later time.
Maybe plate tectonics pushed the ground up, creating the hill.
Maybe. No, couldn't be. If the animal died and then the ground was pushed up, where would he be now? He would have rotted away. There would have had to have been some type of burying action to be, well, buried.
Maybe dirt sediments from water were laid down. Then plate tectonics pushed that up, creating the hill.
Maybe. No, couldn't be. In the lower rock layers we find defined animal footprints. Most animals underwater swim, they don't walk. This would indicate the layers were already above the water line when they were created. Additionally, many layers do not contain sea deposits like sand and shells.
Volcanoes lift Earth from a lower elevation to a higher one. Could this explain how the hill was created?
Rocks created from volcanoes is called igneous. Igneous rocks may be a factor, but they're only 15% of the volume in question. It is important to note we are not going to find many fossils inside igneous rocks, for obvious reasons. Volcanic ash does fit the bill, but most hills have very little of this. I think we should focus on sedimentary rock, because it is what the vast majority of the hills are made of. Also, it is where you're going to find fossils.
Maybe glaciers from a distant past built the place up.
Maybe glaciers were here in the past. Fortunately, they still exist elsewhere on the planet. We can see how they behave. It looks to me like they travel downhill, cutting through layered rock, creating valleys. It does not look like they travel uphill, building mountains.
Maybe the buildup is caused by many years of trees depositing leaves on the ground.
True, trees absorb carbon dioxide from the air and turn it into a solid. This process successfully brings additional solid carbon material to the area. You can spot this tree carbon in the rock layers. It's black in color. But trees cannot explain the layered material which is not carbon. Unfortunately, the vast majority of layered material we find is not carbon.
You realize all you have to do is Google the answer.
That would be zero fun. Besides, the queen would be like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you. You Googled the answer. My hero."
I hate to stop you, but your animation here is a fail.
Why do you say that?
Old black and white photographs show it was taller in the past. This is an example of something tall eroding into something small. This is not an example of something growing.
That is puzzling. You know what? It would reason that the eroded rocks from the top were pulled down by gravity into these piles of rubble at the bottom. And the black rock at the top formed the black pile here. This hill isn't growing upward, it's eroding downward. This natural arch is made of rock, meaning it had to be underground at one point. Then erosion and gravity pulled all of the material away, leaving the arch remaining. In the past, this area was higher in elevation, and now it is lower. Look at all these other examples. They are like skeletal remains of much larger hills. But all that was chiseled away by erosion and carried away by gravity. Do you suspect this arch is growing? It looked like this in the past? And then this? Sadly, no. In 2017, gravity and erosion did as you would expect. What about this famous landmark? I can assume these sedimentary pillars did not grow out of the ocean. It's obvious the pillars and the cliff were once connected. Then erosion, water, and gravity carried the missing material into the ocean. As proof, this rock formation was lost in 2005. You have to wonder how much wider this continent was in the past. Google search coastlines. Can you locate an image that doesn't show signs of eroding into the ocean? If it has any height and it's near the ocean, it's making its way into the ocean. With all of these rock layers eroding away, how in the heck are new rock layers forming on top?
Me, ooh, pick me!
Oh, what do you got?
First, let's talk about all the clues. We have a thing called the geologic column. A long time ago, in the past, one layer was built on top of the other layer through slow and natural means. The oldest layer being on the bottom, the newest layer being on the top, freezing the fossils in time. This is an important process. This is how we can safely say dinosaur bones are very, very old.
Where can we see this process in action?
This is known science. Let's Google search the formation process, like you did erosion.
Certainly. This should help me understand. Again, fossils are found in what type of rock? Sedimentary rock. All of these examples declare fossils are found in sedimentary rock. This one states sedimentary rock, and the graphic depicts the geologic column, with land animals starting about halfway up. You can find humans at the top of their drawing. Additionally to sedimentary rock, this one states lava rock would destroy fossils. Now let's check out photos of the formation process.
This is strange. We have sat through boring photo after boring photo of the erosion process, but in the formation process, I'm only spotting drawings. I do spot a couple photos, but they are again of erosion. Show me a photo of the formation process.
Add the keyword photos to the end. Formation photos. Well, anyways, again, too slow of a process for photos.
The geologic column tells us animals died and were buried in the past. In order to be buried, they would have to get covered up in dirt. Guess what process did this burying, locking each set of fossils on a higher layer than the previous layer? Here is your final opportunity to guess.
It weathers, then it erodes from a high place down into the rivers, the lake beds, and the sea, thus creating the rock layers we have today.
My question was, how do the high hills get created? It wasn't, how do the lowest places on Earth get filled with dirt?
Here, let me find an example you'll understand. It weathers, it erodes, it deposits, it compacts, and then it becomes a hill in the desert.
What? How did it go from being down in the water to becoming a hill? I feel a critical step on how the rock got out of the water was blatantly skipped.
Maybe they just failed to address that detail.
Let's check out another.
This diagram is nearly identical, down to the placement of the sun and the cactus. Goes to show, if you don't want to fail in the school system, you gotta regurgitate the information as you are told. Whoever made this deserves an A for regurgitation.
Let's find another example.
For real, this is nearly the same drawing. Except this one shows erosion going down into a valley. Logically, this teaches a valley ends up as a hill.
Come on, the diagram is meant for kids.
Hey, I'm just saying that's what it teaches. If you teach them bad science when they're young, it's possible they will never reevaluate what they were taught. Have you ever succeeded at convincing an adult of anything? You gotta wonder, why do these diagrams fail to explain what the photos actually demonstrate? Logic tells me this river cut the sedimentary hill. It didn't build it.
A deeper look at the rock layers.
Flat rock layers are everywhere. Unfortunately, most are covered up by plant life. In places of dense vegetation, it's only where rivers or humans have exposed them that we can see the layers. But they are underground, regardless if you can see them or not. Odds are they're under your feet now. From this angle, we can see how the layers span through the ground. Imagine the layers continuing out like this into the distant horizon. And from this angle, we can see how vast, even, flat, and horizontal those layers are. The lack of plants and the distinctness of the layers make the Grand Canyon perfect for comprehending what rock layers look like. Thanks to the river cutting this area, we get a sliced view of the layering. Cliffs are also helpful. Again, the question of this video is, how is another layer going to get on top of the layers you see here? And where is the extra soil going to be pulled from to build that additional layer? Here we can see where men have dug into the ground, exposing the layers. The ground in this area is sitting on horizontal layering. And logically, it extends further out than you can see. Here's another type of terrain. This can be found in the Google Street View of Google Earth. On both sides of the road, we can see the layered hills. Clearly, these layers were once connected until men cut this gap. These layers extend horizontally through this hill. From this view, we can confirm that logic, as we can see the layers continue horizontally into the hill in the background. And that hill has additional layers that stack up to an even higher altitude. How did the top layer get up there? Where did its building material get pulled from? From Google Earth, we can achieve a better comprehension of what we're looking at. Here we can see the exposed layers are at the top of the hills, and there are many hills just like them. Unfortunately, vegetation covers most of the rock layers. But we can infer the same rock layers exist within each of them. The hills have just been separated by these valleys. From above, we can get a better understanding of the valleys. To me, those lines look like erosion paths, as though the hills were the same height until erosion carved those valleys. As we fly down, you will notice most of the hills cap at a near identical height, adding to the belief this whole area was built to this height here. Then erosion carved the valleys out, meaning, although the area looks different because of the valleys, the layers appear to be flat and continuous for miles, like all the other examples we looked at. So how are these perfect layered rocks sequentially forming?
Don't landslides produce layering on top of old layering?
Layers, yes. Large, perfectly horizontal layers? I've not seen that. Do these look like a match to you?
Maybe the rain comes by and flattens them out.
Do you recall seeing rainwater create flat areas? I bet you can recall rain digging trenches or potholes. This is what it looks like on the small scale. For a large-scale example, look at these massive 2,500-foot tall sedimentary mountains. You can see the horizontal layering, and from this view, you can see they share a nearly perfectly horizontal top. I would assume this entire surrounding area was once as tall as the top of these mountains are. Then erosion cut these valleys away, leaving the mountains. Lucky for us, this example does not have the vegetation on it. Here we can see the layers span through each of the hills. Does it appear to you rainwater is creating flatness or destroying it? This view is quite puzzling. In order for the rock layers to grow over time, a higher place has to provide additional building material. Can you spot the higher place where the building material is pulled from to produce these layers? The only thing I can spot is erosion. Where can I find an example of the formation process?
Well, sure it erodes there, but it is settling further downstream. Have you never watched TV?
Now, becoming a fossil is no easy thing. First, the plant or animal has to die, and then it has to get buried, usually by erosion. You know, rain falls down, washes dirt downhill, and covers things.
Okay, so maybe the buildup is simply further downhill. It appears the water takes the debris down this path. Here the walls are high, and it slants down to the river. This river has carved this area out, and it must be redepositing it someplace else. Here it looks like the river is cutting the rock and depositing nothing. Let's go further down. High eroded walls, low center. All these erosion lines pointing straight to the river. It has to be depositing the debris somewhere. Are we doing this right? Let's check out this explanation from PBS. We have our river.
Check.
Mountains in the back.
Check.
Dino dies. It rains. He gets covered in mud. Wowzers, he gets buried deep. Those are rivers above him. This should be very easy to locate. Good night. According to PBS, these river sediments will create massive flat sediment layers. Are we just missing them? No perfectly flat layers found forming here. Oh wait, here we go. Just kidding. Rivers cut, they don't build. The river has to be giving up its dirt somewhere. Wait, over there. I found where it's depositing the mountains. In the sea, like I've been saying this whole time. This fails to explain how we get new sedimentary mountains in the high places. The BBC indicates the same story. Water is found exclusively in the lowest immediate location. That means surrounding every river, you will find higher ground. If water sediment is the cause of the ever-growing rock layers, how can those high areas form by a river that can never reach their tops? If water cannot reach the height of the high areas in the background, even in a severe flood, then how can water be the cause of the building process? Can rivers create flat areas or only expose them? River sediment only gets deposited in the lowest of the lows, a place where the river would simply consume it again later. During a flood, most of the sediment goes into the ocean. The sediment that sticks around typically isn't deposited far from the river, because even during a flood, the water is trapped in the very valley it created. Even then, it does not produce vast, flat, even, horizontal layering like the rock layers. Remember what the rock layers look like. How is a low-lying river ever going to add to these rock layer stacks? But I bet it was a river that exposed them.
One river isn't evidence. I'd like to see another.
Certainly. When I look, everything matches how I would expect it to look. I see a river that is at the lowest possible location, and the existing sedimentary layered hills at the highest. I see where erosion has cut deep valleys, with a guilty-looking river at the bottom of all those erosion lines. I'm not seeing material sequentially accumulating on top of existing old layers, as this drawing demonstrates. And why did Bill Nye, PBS, and the BBC all choose to use drawings instead of photos? Where do things behave this way? When I look at rivers, they transport old hills away from the land and deposit it into the ocean. Does areas touched by rain or river water look like the rock layers? How did the last layer to form get up here? How will the next layer to form get on top of the rest?
How the building process occurs is curiously dodged.
You're only looking at images. What does that prove? I feel you'll have more success reading what they're claiming.
All right, again, let's use Google to see common examples. No cherry picking. I'm speeding this up so it's less boring. You're welcome to press pause or view the websites for